Hello, everybody. This is Liam Billingham, co-host of Oeuvre Busters. Before we jump into this week's episode on happiness, featuring Phillip Seymour Hoffman, I would like to ask you to please, if you have not, rate, review, and subscribe to our show. It really helps us get attention. The best place for you to review is on Apple Podcasts. That seems to be where most of our listeners are listening to the show. And the more reviews, the more ratings we get, the more people will find the show. Right now, we have 16 reviews, 15 of which are 5 stars and 1 is 4 stars. And whoever wrote that 4-star review, we're going to find you. And thank you for reviewing our podcast. We love you. This is a unique episode because for reasons that I won't get into that are boring, I'm actually recording the introduction before I've finished editing the episode. I do want to apologize for just what I think are going to be the just really offensive stuff that George does and says during the episode, in addition to his mouth breathing. You know, I tried to cut it all out, but there was just so much problematic material that at a certain point I just had to throw my hands in the air and release it. So apologies if you are just any kind of person from any background that's offended by this, which is probably everybody. George has a real problem. Yeah, that's it. We hope you enjoy this week's episode on happiness. I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm George Fragopoulos.
And this is Oeuvre Busters.
Oh, you did it.
I did do it.
Yay! Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Walker.
Ton.
You for fucking stepping all over my
Ton.
Listen, I need to let all
your farts out.
all of our listener know that I have seen Star Wars.
Star Wars?
That was my opportunity.
Star Wars?
Star Wars to say like I've seen the Star Wars. I know what it's all about.
Star Wars for Refreshing Hope. That's a really good one.
So 1998, Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
Directed by Todd Solondz, also starring Dylan Baker.
Lara,
Flynn
Boyle, Jane.
Elizabeth Ashley. The incredible
Jane Addams.
The incredible Jane Addams.
Catherine Mannheim makes an appearance.
Jared Harris makes an appearance. And
we should
Ben Gazzara.
Gazzara, of course, yes.
So I feel like it's crazy.
It's ridiculous because this is actually Gazzara cast.
It
Gazzara
is.
Cast.
Welcome to Gazzara Cast, the home of all things Ben Gazzara. So this is 98, the same year as Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
This film came out like a few months after Big Lebowski, which is
Sure.
why we did it second. No, I looked up the dates specifically. Also, it's worth
We are
noting that this
here at
film
Oeuvre
was
Busters.
produced by Good Machine and Killer Films. Good Machine was Ted Hope's company.
Good.
And Killer Films was Christine Vachon's company.
You got it.
And I just think it's worth pausing and like Ted Hope is really important. I mean, is really important for independent film, and like, you know, he got a lot of people's careers off the ground, and like I don't think this movie gets made now, and I think it's because like movies like this don't have the same pull in the industry, and I think it's because the industry's changed, but also Ted Hope is doing other things, and Christine Vachon is notable because she's like produced a slew of films, but most recently she produced First Reformed, the Paul Schrader.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing film.
And she's like a badass person and human being. So worth noting that like Good Machine was this incredible thing that happened, and it's not around anymore. And I don't think you would have gotten a vision this specific if there weren't these companies. A lot of people like give credit to the directors entirely, but it's producers that get these things.
Yeah, that's really
on screen.
That historical kind of context is interesting too, because obviously I did not know any of that. But I am interested to talk about this film as a historical document.
Let's talk about it as a historical
document. The late 90s.
Before we do that, can I attempt a summary, or do you want to do it?
No, please go ahead.
All right, I'll attempt the quick summary, and then you take us through the long
summary. It is a bit
summary.
of a baggy monster.
So Happiness is about the Jordan sisters broadly. There's There's Joy Jordan, played by Jane Addams. There's Helen Jordan, played by Lara Flynn Boyle. And there's Trish Jordan, whose name is now Maplewood, played by Cynthia Stevenson.
Correct.
Who's fucking incredible in this movie.
I really did not like this film, but the performances are incredible.
And would you just hold off on your goddamn opinion? And Dylan Baker as Bill Maplewood, Trish's husband. Peripherally to that, there are their parents, who are played by Louise Lasser as Mona Jordan and Ben Gazzara as Lenny Jordan. And the film is kind of about their lives. Jane is sort of a musician/teacher who's not really sure what to do with her life and gets into a complicated relationship with a student played by Jared Harris. Lara, Flynn, Boyle, Helen Jordan is an author.
She's a poet,
one of those,
which is weird. It says she's a poet,
but it's unclear. This is one of those movies that it seems like the person writing it didn't really know what it's like to be a professional writer,
right?
Which is weird. And also, the final family member is Trish, who his husband Bill is revealed throughout the course of the film to be a pederast.
Very early on, too.
Very early on, revealed to have a very problematic relationship to young boys.
Yeah, to
and
least.
then he rapes 2 of them. And there's also a character named Alan, played by Phillip Seymour Hoffman, who doesn't directly connect to the film until the very, very end, and his sort of strange... Well, that's not
in
true.
the very beginning, you find out he's in therapy with Dylan Baker.
He is in therapy with Dylan Baker. I forgot about that. Bill Maplewood. And he also has an obsession with Bill's sister-in-law, Lara Flynn Boyle. And by the end of the film, he has a stronger connection to the family, but he also has a thematic connection to the young boy in the film, which we can talk about, which I want to get into a little bit.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
I find movies where everything is connected to be so goddamn pedantic and cliche.
It can be. I think if it feels like it's forced, it totally does not work.
It doesn't entirely feel like it's forced in this, but I'm still mildly annoyed by it.
And then the film ends with...
It ends with someone coming.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it there.
Quite literally.
So, Bill Fragopoulos?
Yeah.
That was my... How was that description?
It was amazing. But Cameron Manheim. I believe I said Catherine Manheim. I'm sorry for mispronouncing.
So you didn't like the film. So let's talk about the film. What'd you... overall impressions.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Okay, good.
The end.
Moving on.
That's it, right?
Thanks for listening to Oeuvre Fusters.
I will say this, that I definitely... the performances I thought were great.
Yeah, it's a really well-acted movie.
I wasn't bored, but
Good.
I was repelled in a way that I felt was not productive. Let's leave it at
Oh, interesting.
that.
Repelled in a not productive way.
I just felt like, again, it was going for shocking in a very kind of rather simplistic sort of way. So I tweeted out also, like, jokingly but not jokingly.
George doesn't joke when he tweets.
Definitely not on Twitter.
He takes Twitter very seriously.
That this film was about, like, the end of history. That it was about a moment, let's say, in American history.
Here we go with the politics again.
I'm not getting off this soapbox. Can you
not yell into the goddamn microphone?
Certain kind of, like the Clinton era politics.
Okay.
The end of obviously any sort of kind of any sort of, there's no, like, let's say, kind of a outside to capitalism with the fall of the Soviet Union, right? The capitalism is kind of like taking over the world, blah blah blah. And that's what we're kind of suggest by saying by the end of history. This is a very bad summation. You're going to have to edit a lot of this out. But just the whole point is that there's no, let's say, I felt that these people's ennui and their joylessness and their sadness was not in any sort of way kind of earned, if that makes sense.
I'm very intrigued by that. When you talk about, and I might edit this out, but I'm curious. When you talk about the end of history, do you mean history with like a capital H, or do you mean... So what is that?
Just basically that everything that's happening here with these characters, that there's no kind of sense, that their depression, let's say, or their sadness has anything to do with, let's say, capitalism, and or that there's no sense of happiness that is not happiness other than in the most simplistic, narcissistic way.
Okay, so that's interesting to me.
It's not at all a coincidence. Like, the entire thesis of the film is the fact that the fucking kid masturbates and, like, comes at the end. And I was like, great, like, that is... And because why does that happen at the very end? It's a moment of happiness. But it to me, it's also, like, the most... It's, like, the cheapest, crassest kind of expression of that.
Yeah.
That there's no sense of, let's say, joy that exists.
Which is interesting because that's the main character's name, Joy.
Oh, yeah, very good, yeah. That exists outside of the self. And that, to me, was what was really upsetting about this film.
So when you say... Is your nose okay? Are you
yeah,
doing coke?
I've been doing lots of coke. I
stayed up all night watching Todd Solondz complete filmography and doing coke.
I was just trying to figure. Yeah.
Stay on that mic. I'm being really critical.
I guess that's kind of what I meant.
I don't know if I understand it, so let's dig into let's get through this.
Let's walk through the film.
Let's walk through the film, but I will say that I think that the whenever you make a film about happiness, would cause your audience maybe to reflect on your definition of happiness.
Totally.
And, there's this great theater director named Richard Foreman, and he has a book about directing, and he wrote this thing about how, like, he wanted, when people watch his work, this is years ago, so he might not ascribe to this anymore, but when he wrote this book, he was like, I want people to be looking at my choices. I don't want people to be thinking about the actor. I want them to be thinking about me. Which is like, however you may feel about that as like a response to something, whatever. But I spent a lot of time watching this thinking about, like, who the fuck is Todd Solondz?
As a person?
Yeah, well, just like, what is this thing?
Yeah, it's funny too.
It's a very perplexing movie.
Because I also went back and I found a short piece that Roger Ebert wrote about the new geek cinema. And I remembered, I misremembered.
Like who like Hal Hartley? Or?
I don't remember exactly who, but obviously Solondz.
Do your research,
kind
Fragopoulos.
I should have done taken better notes. But Ebert was very, he liked this film.
Sure. I like this film in some way. I really like this film in some ways. We can talk about what those are, but
yeah,
I don't think it's too much to dismiss it. I sort of tweeted that it does nothing for me as a movie. But I do like some things about the film. I think it's like exceptionally well crafted. Let's get into it, right? Should we just get into it? Film begins
with
the critic himself.
The critic himself.
Jon Lovitz. In an amazing... He's amazing in this movie.
He is amazing in this, yeah. And he's having dinner with
Joy Jordan, played by the effervescent, incredible Jane Adams. And also effervescent because, especially early on in the film, she's lit entirely with the soft light.
Oh.
And it keeps cutting on the soft light, and then it keeps cutting onto Jon Lovitz's face as she breaks up with him.
Yeah.
And it's a much harder light, and it's very, very artificial.
So they're having dinner, and it's a breakup scene.
At a weird restaurant.
Yeah, and it's a very kind of obviously like uncomfortable, awkward breakup scene. And basically she dumps him.
Right.
And he kind of loses it. At some point he gives her a gift.
Yeah, which is a ashtray.
Yeah, after she dumps him. And then he quickly takes it back, and he's like, no, I just want you to know.
You think I'm ugly.
What are you missing out on? Because I'm going to give that ashtray. Great gift.
Amazing gift.
Amazing gift, yeah. By the way, thank you for that ashtray.
You're welcome.
For my birthday, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Also, when it was inscribed with my name.
Yeah,
like,
the
calligraphy.
It's a lot of...
Whoever did the calligraphy on that. An artist. And
it was the same person that made the prop for the movie Happiness.
And it quickly goes sour, and he kind of takes it back from her, and he's like, no. He goes like...
It's very hate-filled speech.
Yeah, he goes like, I'm champagne and you're shit. And basically this kind of thing where he says like, oh, you think kind of I'm shit, but
who do you think
turns out that
Todd
you're
hates
shit.
more, men or women?
I think he's a misanthrope in general. But this is also going back to that Ebert thing. And sorry if to kind of already derail us.
Oh, Jesus.
I know. I just love Roger Ebert. Rest in peace.
You just said Roger to Ebert.
Roger?
I love Roger to Ebert.
Roger Ebert?
Hello, I'm Roger Ebert.
That's his cyborg. So the thing that Ebert said or that Solondz said in this interview with Ebert is that he likes these characters and that he kind of feels bad for them, and I was like, no fucking way. Like this,
interesting.
Like
no, that's interesting.
You are like
there might be some cognitive dissonance.
Perhaps.
So what happens after Jane? So then we have a little title card. This is Happiness.
And some music. And then we cut to Lara Flynn Boyle coming home. And this is also where we get her first interaction with
Phillip Seymour Hoffman, played by Alan. Now, worth noting...
actually, sorry, we're skipping the therapy session. Because before this, actually, there's a therapy session. Cuts to Phillip Seymour Hoffman in therapy.
Already off the summary.
Should we edit that out? So, cut to Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
Sitting
right there. Second scene.
And he is... he's in therapy.
Yeah, with Dylan Baker.
And his doctor is Bill Maplewood, played by the incredible Dylan Baker.
He's
Dylan
amazing.
Baker is... This is what a move to do this movie.
Yes.
What a move.
Would you say he's the best part of the movie? In terms of obviously his performance.
I think so.
Yeah.
I know he's definitely my fave character. Love him.
So and this is also I felt like it was like kind of a cheap, funny scene. So obviously like Phillip Seymour Hoffman
cheap.
Is going on and on about how terrible his existence is, how terrible his life is, how awful he is.
And then he feels like no one listens to him and notices him. And then of course
the interior monologue.
Dylan Baker begins an internal monologue where he's listing what he has to do, which is not something that any human being does. No one sits there like I'm talking to you right now. In my head, I don't have the internal monologue of like
it's so
gotta pick up my Gotta pick up the groceries.
It's such a bad joke,
Gotta
though.
dry clean. It's such a bad joke.
Yeah, it's such a bad joke. But can we?
It's also not funny.
Not
Jokes
funny.
are supposed to be funny, and it's hacky.
Exactly. Can we also, by the way, just very briefly talk about how? So one of the things also that you suggested is when we take a look at the very brief clip of Phillip Seymour Hoffman from Boogie Nights.
Yes.
With the "I'm an idiot" scene.
Yeah, when he kisses Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, which is fucking.
I have a big theory that I
amazing.
want to talk about. That I think I want to wait till we get to the end
cool.
to talk about.
But
it.
I just wanted to quickly say that.
No, I said I want to wait until the end.
So think about that scene.
I got you an ashtray.
From Boogie Nights. How amazing it is that Phillip Seymour Hoffman kind of embodies physically the characters he plays.
Oh my god.
And he just does such an amazing.
He's fucking
amazing job of
incredible.
doing that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
The sadness and kind of the pathetic quality of this character just comes across in the way
like
he carries
instantaneously, and he knows what to do with his mouth and his face, and like I wonder like if on set he was I don't see him as the kind of actor who has to like stay in character or anything like that. I see him as a guy that can. I mean, this is predicated upon nothing except that he just seems like a craftsman as much as like an artist.
I actually heard though on the set of MI3 was trying constantly to kill Tom Cruise even between. Why are you laughing? This is serious. Even like, in between scenes.
Fuck you both. Fucking you come out your ears. Tom Cruise was like, what?
What? He's like, you know
Tom,
what you need? Scientology
I'm gonna
session.
fuck you.
I have some coupons here, Philip.
Phil. They had already done a movie together though before Mission Impossible 3. It was called Magnolia.
By what's his
Paul
name?
Thomas Anderson.
No, that doesn't sound about right. So then we cut to Lara Flynn Boyle, who's a writer or poet, I guess.
Poet
we find
of some
out.
kind, who's kind of like is there a comparative to like who like obviously she's not supposed to be as specific, but do you get as
Sierra, do you want to get in on the podcast?
Oh my God, Lara Flynn Boyle is here.
My dog is. Sierra, come here. Sierra.
This is fucking amateur hour.
Sierra, come here.
So ridiculous.
Sierra.
Where does the name Sierra come from?
Sierra. It's like
is it a Gaelic name?
No, it's actually Italian.
Sounds pretty Gaelic.
It means like cheetah, like little baby, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's very cute.
Cira.
Cira?
Cira, yeah.
Sierra.
Smell Liam's secrets.
Smell my sneaks. Smell my sneaks.
So we cut to Lara Flynn Boyle. Oh wait, you're
yeah. Do you feel like there's like
a comparison?
I don't know. It's just like you're very well read and you know a lot of writers.
Of course I am.
Is there like a?
I am wearing a tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows right now.
Well, you know what?
Smoking a pipe.
Stop. All your students on RateMyProfessors.com
they're
say
right.
you're great.
Yeah. No, they actually hate me. So. Is there well, here's another, I think, shitty thing about the film. And yes, I get it. It's not really about her as a writer
right.
or poet,
but,
whatever.
But verisimilitude is important.
It is important.
Generality is the enemy of art, so said Konstantin Stanislavski. Do you guys hate me yet? Because I hate me.
As it is on this podcast.
I hate myself so much. So, it's a really funny story. I went on vacation with my now wife and my very good friend and another good friend a couple years ago. And he's the kind of friend who... everything is an inside joke, and we spent a week just doing really pathetic impressions of Phillip Seymour Hoffman. Oh, fuck you, such an idiot! Fucking idiot!
So
stupid.
And when you're
I thought it was the funniest thing.
And when you then girlfriend,
I thought it was so funny.
When your then girlfriend made it through,
yeah,
that's how you were like,
you
I need to marry.
marry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna marry this woman because if she could put up
idiot,
with that,
will you marry me? I love you so much. Wow, we're really off the rails.
So there's so we don't get a sense of her as an artist. I mean, we do get a little bit of a sense
She
of like
reads from her thing at one
joy.
point.
When? I don't remember that. It's been a while since I've seen this, but I don't remember her reading.
Isn't there? No, she's not reading, but she's looking. Maybe we see a cover. We see like a bit of poetry.
I honestly do not remember that.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I feel like it does a bad joke. A bad joke. I feel like it does a bad job with dealing with her as an artist.
That's good to know.
So we cut to her coming home, and her neighbor is
Phillip
Seymour
Allen, played by Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
And we find out that obviously we find out very quickly that he is obsessed with her.
Now let's take a minute and discuss, because I think it's important to understand. He's sort of a chubby guy.
He is.
He's glasses. He's clean shaven. He dresses like every white guy in the late 90s. Everything is very sort of, his clothing is very sort of pale. Like he doesn't wear any rich colors. And he works in tech. He's in some kind of IT position.
Correct.
And he's kind of in the elevator and he wants to talk to her.
Right, and he's struggling to talk to her.
And then actually the second he says something, he's kind of suave for like how he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And you're like, "Whoa."
Is he really?
I mean, I think
she's
he comes
totally
off as
disgusted from the very beginning.
He comes off as quite natural for like half a second though, and you can see how hard he's working.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yes. But I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. I felt very deeply for this guy. He's maybe the most sympathetic, one of the most sympathetic. I think Joy is the most sympathetic character in the movie, but he's very sympathetic. And I think in a film where everyone is horrible, and that's when I say I find it very hard to latch on to anything in this movie. Everyone in this movie is horrible.
Correct.
They're horrible white people.
Yeah. But I felt like, again, that there's that horribleness isn't earned.
It's empty.
It's empty.
Do you think it's like a satire?
I think there's certain satirical elements, yeah. But again, I feel like also even in satire, you have to kind of care about your characters. And I feel like these people have been developed just so he could fucking shit on them.
I agree. It's a very smooth movie. Like, it has nothing to latch on to in terms of, like, who I'm supposed to care about and feel deeply about. And that could be, I will give Todd Solondz the benefit of the doubt and say, like, maybe that's an intentional choice. Because he is an artist, and he is very in charge of his craft, and he's a really... I wouldn't say he's, at least from my point of view, an incredibly deep writer, because I don't think this film has that. I think it has one really interesting thing to say. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, I don't think it has that much to say. But he's like meticulous, and the performances are almost, with the exception of some weird moments, almost really perfectly modulated. But I still don't feel like it says anything. Anyway. It doesn't.
And and again,
get there.
And we'll get to like more of the shocking moments too. But again, I feel like its most shocking moments are not earned because again, I would say like the most sympathetic character is fucking Dylan Baker, and only because only because he does a great job. And that's what I think is a problem with the fucking film. Like when your most sympathetic character is the pedophile and the rapist, like you're doing something wrong.
I think,
I feel like it's sorry, and I feel like again, like the shocking.
I was just talking.
The shock. Can you shut the fuck up for a second? I feel like the shocking aspects of that are where like the film loses me, like, oh, isn't it edgy?
So provocative?
Yeah,
but I think in fairness, this is a hard thing to articulate, but the movie's almost ironic. It has this sort of glaze over it that prevents you from engaging in it, but that's a great word to use, also like a lack of irony. But irony has become such like a central, unfortunate tenet of our culture that I think the movie now loses almost all impact because it feels like a museum. In 20 years on, it feels like a museum piece.
Right.
And again, I don't want to shit on... it's hard to make a fucking movie, and it's almost impossible to make a movie like this, but I feel like it's very much a product of its time, which might be how it relates to your theory about the end of history.
Yeah. Like this film struck me as being very, like... Clinton era kind of like the politics has kind of exhausted itself, like history's exhausted itself, like this is the dead end.
But don't you feel like that could be something the movie's trying to say?
But that, again, no, I really don't. Because again, I think like when moments of happiness do occur, they're presented in such a kind of narcissistic way. Again, like the dead end of like I came. I mean, if that's where your film goes, and again, I get it. I get that there might be like a satirical element to it.
Well, don't forget what happens immediately before that. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So
Phillip
Seymour Hoffman's Alan strikes out with Lara Flynn Boyle.
He showers, gets on his bed, and calls her. Yeah. Which is great too, like some nostalgia. He flips through the phone book,
and then he hangs up.
Yeah, and he goes like, "I'll fuck you so hard, I'll fuck you so hard."
I'm gonna fuck you so
and she's
hard.
like, "Who is this?" And all we hear is her voice, and he quickly hangs up. And that's obviously like what his character is. We find out he's the guy who calls up women and
so
is
quick
disgusting
note,
to them.
When I saw this, the first time I watched this film was like, well, I moved here. I watched it pretty soon after moving here, so I would say that I saw it in 2010, 2009, 2010, and I thought that stuff was so funny.
There's a lot of funny.
Fuck you so hard. But now to think about that kind of person kind of existing in their gross apartment. Yeah. Of course, now it would be someone in front of a computer.
Right.
It's so disgusting. And it's not, I mean, again, it's funny because like it's Phillip Seymour Hoffman and it's this now like revered, actor who passed away well before his time, like in his early work. And it's funny because it's so pathetic, but now like, that's the kind of motherfucker that runs this country. Yeah. So it's like a lot harder to laugh at. It sticks in your throat now.
Totally, yeah. Then we cut to Joy, who's
Right.
having lunch with her sister.
Cynthia Stevenson.
Yeah, Trish.
Who Cynthia Stevenson may have the second most thankless role in this movie.
Yes.
And
she kills it.
she's
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
And she's also, of course, like detestable because she kind of lords her, seemingly amazing life on her over like her sister. She's like, oh, I have it all. Like, I have the kids.
I'm
a great husband.
Yeah, and it's like she's not very self-aware.
And she's like telling her sister, like, oh, what you really need
We
to
never
do
thought
is
you were going to
eat.
amount to anything,
Yes,
Joy.
Exactly. She's like, well, like, to be honest, like, the entire family was like, no, you suck. You're a loser. It's also really interesting to think that two of the sisters are artists and like Trish isn't. And later on, Trish says that she might want to write a novel.
Oh my God.
And she gets like laughed at.
I could write a novel. I could write a novel. I just don't know if I want that kind of fame.
Yeah. So it's interesting to think, but it's interesting to think about her as like a failed artist.
Right.
And
well, the movie also has a very strict definition of like what artists. I feel like in some ways, like I just feel like, do you sometimes feel like sometimes movies that, and I feel this way about like Lars von Trier, like that they're so stuck to a particular point of view about the world that they border on a kind of like conservatism, and like when I say that, like I mean like a negative kind of like, I mean all
Yes,
conservatism is
yeah.
generally negative unless it's related to like
fucking awful.
obvious, unless it's related to like obvious important conservation activities
Right.
and stuff like that, but which obviously they're different things, but like I don't think I really like this guy's values at all, because I feel like he's like, I'm 17 and this is how the world is.
That's what I mean. Yeah, no, like exactly. That there's excellent. That's what, going back to like the end of history thing. It's sort of fucking make it so like academic sounding, but that there's no outside to this enclosed, narcissistic, cynical, degrading
But that
world.
we could give him. One could make the argument that that's the point. That's what he's saying. That these people are so self-absorbed that they don't acknowledge a world outside themselves.
But I feel like if there's nothing in the film that gestures towards that, then there.
See, this is where I think there might be room for a larger discussion.
Yeah. But I didn't find that in the film. I'd be interested to hear what you said as far as
let's
that
keep
outside.
going. I'm saving
so now we
this.
cut to this scene. Actually, I thought was really funny. Cut to Dylan Baker walking through the park, and what does he have in his hands? Oh, that's right, an automatic weapon. Are you laughing yet?
No, it's like.
And he shoots up the park, and you find out
It's awful.
This is like, of course, it's awful. Yeah,
Especially because there was totally 3 shootings
sarcastic.
today, probably.
Yeah, like Welcome to America. So, and then you find out that this is like a fantasy that he constantly has.
That he talks to his therapist.
About. And his therapist says something like, "Oh, like." So you found this version of your fantasy kind of, I forget what he says, but like optimistic. He's like, oh yeah, because I didn't kill myself at the end of this one. Cut to Dylan Baker. This is when the film gets really funny. No, I don't.
Oh, is this the magazine?
Yeah, and he runs into.
He's driving.
We still don't know that he's a pedophile. We don't know.
Well, he might not be a pedophile yet, in the sense that we don't know
Yet?
if this stuff has happened before.
Oh.
What I mean to say is,
no.
I wonder if this is the first time he's ever raped anyone.
Oh, I totally know. I think this is like been going on for a very long time.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah. Because don't you feel like obviously the fantasies are like a symptom of that, like of this kind of that he realizes obviously that he's a monster?
No, I think that the arc of the film only gets him there.
Oh, I totally disagree. No, I think.
Well, you're wrong,
yeah.
so it's like hard for me to debate. No, I don't know. I mean, I could be being totally naive. I mean, I don't. It's not that I think that like you can localize a problem and be like it's just this, but like the sort of clumsiness with which he tries to execute that rape of that kid is like sort of interestingly like. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something.
Yeah.
It feels. Also, I think from like a dramatic stakes perspective, it's a little more interesting if it's.
If this is
Yeah,
him.
it's what a fucking perverse thing we're talking about right now.
Well, I mean, welcome to happiness.
So he goes. He stops at a like a CVS.
Yeah.
No, not to drag CVS into this, but and then he buys like a teen.
Brought to you by CVS.
He buys like a Teen Bop magazine,
something like that.
and then he gets to the.
And
back
you see
of
the same magazine later on in this kid's.
You gotta wonder if it's the same copy.
Yeah,
which bothers me.
And he cuts to him like in his car
right,
and
he's in his car and he like almost doesn't get to the car before he jerks off.
Yeah.
And the film very effectively puts a family and their daughter getting into the car behind him, and you hear very clearly them talking, and it's like it's very, very, very troubling. Also, a kind of movie that comes at the end of is not too far away from when American Beauty got released.
Huh.
And American Beauty is obviously like the sanitized version of this.
That's a really interesting comparison. Yeah.
It's a terrible movie.
Just about how awful like suburbia is and how.
Yeah.
So we cut to Dylan Baker coming home.
Yes.
And he has like an exchange with his wife. And this is actually where he also kind of maybe gives one of the thesis statements of the film where they're kind of talking about just being lonely. And I think like he says something like, oh, we're all alone. And obviously, like to some degree, I think she kind of either, I don't remember exactly, but she kind of either dismisses that or doesn't even kind of like pick up on it.
And this is a moment where the family scenes in this movie border on like
parody, that kind of,
It's like, maybe that's intentional, but if that's intentional, fuck you. Because give me something to, I get that suburbia is awful. I get that these people are in some ways very terrible.
Yeah.
I would like to have a modicum of interest in them as people.
Yes, no, I agree. Yeah, and that's where I think again they're also like caricatures.
Oof, I'm all fired up.
And this, it's funny too because this, so she also like tries to like kiss him, and clearly she's kind of like physically into him, and he kind of like I think pushes her away. But it's also a callback to the therapy scene too. Yeah, it's so gross. Because
they don't have a sexual relationship.
Yeah, he lies to like his therapist and is like, oh, like I'm not into the sex, she's not into the sex, but clearly, obviously, like no, she's into the sex, but he obviously,
oh right, that's a good point,
because of his predilections does not want to have sex with her. And this is where we have like his first, and also so the next scene quickly cuts. We're still in the house where he has his first kind of sexual discussion with his son Billy.
I think these scenes are good.
These scenes are good, yeah, totally. And actually, even so, this is the first time I've seen this film. But I do remember either reading about like the scenes between him and his son.
So explicit.
Yeah, and just about how they're kind of like the emotional core of, this film.
I agree.
And he's basically...
They're kind of perverse discussions between a father and his son.
And he's having, his son Billy is asking Bill just about like, oh, like, Dad, what's cum? And he's like, well, Billy, it's like, let me tell you.
And it's kind of, he gives like a very academic, worth noting that he is a doctor, right? Yeah. So he has like a very clinical response to that.
Yeah, and there's like 3 of these scenes where he'd like to basically have
a triptych.
Ooh, very good, yeah.
Thank you.
This film should have been called
Triptychs, because of the cum. There are literally 2 cum shots in this film.
I only counted 1.
There's the one at
Did you watch the director's
end,
cut?
and then there's the one when Alan comes and then cleans it off the wall with a postcard.
Oh yeah,
it's fucking disgusting.
Just
fuck it. Keep going.
Cut to palm trees, and we are in
sunny Florida. So worth noting very quickly that we didn't talk about this before. The majority of this movie takes place in New Jersey, with a few brief sort of trips into Manhattan. I can't wait to talk about the strikers with you. I'm sure you have opinions on that.
I have opinions about that.
And then Florida, where we see the parental units of the Jordans, Luis Lasser playing Mona Jordan and Ben Gazzara playing Lenny Jordan. This is my least favorite Ben Gazzara performance because I think he's great in it, but like an aging Ben Gazzara like fills me with a deep sadness, and he feels so much older in this than he did in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, so just basically that, like in the sense that he feels
it's also just like I don't know,
like
it's
close to death. Does it remind you of the Grand Spectre of Death?
No, not really. I just he just so worth noting that Mona and Lenny are Lenny has told prior to our introduction in the film, Lenny has told Mona that he wants to leave her. He doesn't want a divorce.
Not a divorce,
but he wants to leave. And they have this really sad, very American moment where they're having a conversation, but they're both watching TV.
Yeah.
The TV's just on, and she's very upset about it.
I will say this though: this film did fill me with like an existential ennui, and like,
oh really?
Like how it like washes over you with like all these characters are like so fucking like depressed.
I don't know.
Just like assholes.
I don't think I felt so.
I did find it funny though, where there's kind of this conversation where it's like, did I say anything about a divorce? I said I want to leave you. I didn't say anything about a divorce.
He just wants to be alone.
Because later on, also she gets mad at somebody who says like, oh, so you're getting a divorce? It's like, who said I said anything about a divorce?
Well, I think that it's interesting because that guy is approximately our father's age, and if you're talking about the idea of the end of history or like American society at a specific moment, the idea of a man in his 60s or 70s closing in on death and wanting to be alone is actually a really, really intriguing idea that the movie doesn't do, in my opinion, nearly enough.
There's a hilarious though sight gag at the very end, which
with the salt,
which I thought was fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's very good. But there is something really sad in the idea of like a man. He's like, by all accounts, has a pretty good life. He's retired. He lives in Florida. I mean, that sounds awful, but
It does.
you know, but
I
then
mean,
he has
if it
these
makes you
3
feel any better, most of them
daughters.
say he'll be underwater in like 30 years.
That's true. So, yeah, I think, Jesus.
And he calls the mom calls Trish, right?
Trish,
is
or
on the
Trish
phone.
calls.
Yeah, and this is where like Trish finds out that they're getting a divorce for the first time.
Did you watch Leno last night? Fucking, of course these fucking people watch Leno.
Oh God, Leno.
Leno's the worst. Letterman all the way, baby.
So we cut to Lara.
Seriously
from
though,
Boyle.
can we talk about Leno?
Jeez, Liam,
Jay
calm down.
Leno is
No, he sucks. He sucks.
he sucks. It's all Letterman all the
Like
time.
the last like 20 years. I mean, some people tell me that at some point he was funny and
He's never
edgy.
funny. Ah, that's my Jay Leno impression.
Do it. Can you do it again?
I own cars. Fuck off.
No, yeah, I do hate him.
Letterman. You like Letterman though, right?
Cut to. I mean, don't you see my Letterman T-shirt?
Oh, that's
from
right.
Right now? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know you were wearing that.
It says Dave 2020.
What actually is that T-shirt?
It's like animals watching a film. But
Oh,
the-
that's
but
cool.
The film
You fucking nerd.
is nerd alert. So we cut to Lara Flynn Boyle. She's another great psych gag in her apartment talking to Joy on the phone.
Right.
And there's some dude like lifting weights in the
Right,
middle of her apartment.
right.
And basically she's kind of complaining
So
to
fuck friend, fuck buddy.
Yeah, she's complaining to Joy, which is also great too because the juxtaposition obviously between like this fucking hunk's body and obviously like Phillip Seymour Hoffman's body
What the hell is that supposed to
goes
mean?
to show. Well, I think it goes to show you the type of man that Lara Flynn Boyle is like attracted to.
So attracted people suck. Attracted people suck. 'Cause
Yeah,
then I
that's,
suck.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, cool,
Yeah,
got
why
it.
did you think I don't get along with you at all? Why do you think I hate you from the
This is
bottom
weird.
of my heart?
This is really weird.
Can I fuck you? Can I just
Fuck
fuck
you.
Fuck
Come
Fuck
say
you.
yours.
Fuck you.
Sorry about this episode.
And they're having a cover like Lara Flynn Boyle is complaining about like how busy her life is or something, and she says like, oh no, it's actually like not good to be as busy and like as socially active as I am.
Only thing that a successful person, person who's successful critically and like financially can say.
Yeah,
It's just hard to be this busy.
yeah, it's hard to be this busy. And then
Let's go to these dinner parties.
and then basically she gets off the phone with
Right.
her, but Phillip Seymour Hoffman finds her number, right? Finds Joy's number, and
Right.
gives her a call. And I forgot exactly. So I'm assuming obviously he was going through the phone book and looking at people with
That
the
name.
same last name,
Yeah.
right? And so called Joy.
But Joy is expecting a phone call
From
Damien.
yeah,
And she says, "Is this
yeah. And this goes on for a couple
is
of minutes.
this Damien?"
Yeah, and this is actually kind of. I
And
thought
he's
that-
jerking off.
He's jerking off. Yeah.
Hey, what are you wearing?
Yeah, and it takes her
She's like, nothing. She takes forever
to figure it out.
forever to realize who
Oh my
this guy is.
Yeah. But
What are you wearing?
I missed also the
no, like underneath
the connection. Was it Trish that tells her that Damien's calling, or Helen that tells her?
Helen.
Helen tells her.
Yeah,
okay.
Helen. I think it was Helen. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
it's
can't
like,
remember.
oh, this guy's gonna call you.
Yeah, but like they're talking and like it's actually sort of. I mean, if it weren't disgusting, it would feel like. And you know that he's not Damien.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a pitter patter of like. But she's entirely too earnest with him, and he eventually is like, "What are you wearing?" And she says like, "Oh, just jeans and a t-shirt." He's like, "Under that," and
Yeah.
she goes like, "Oh, just some under." And then she goes like, "This isn't Damien, is it?" And he goes, "Is your panties wet or something?" And then he
and then she hung.
then he comes and you see the cum hit the.
Is this when
You see it hit the wall, and then he uses a. I'm like gonna throw up. He uses like basically like a postcard or like an like a mailer to clean up the wall, and then he sticks that to the wall with the cum.
What the fuck are we talking
Happiness
about? What the fuck
again
are we
is
talking about?
available for $17 as a used TVT.
1701 because we want to make a profit off
Yeah,
this.
please.
And then we cut to Cameron Manheim knocking on his
Please buy my copy of Happiness. I need you to buy it so bad.
knocking,
Daddy needs to make money.
knocking on his door.
Cameron
Cameron.
Manheim, who starred in The Practice with Lara Flynn
She
Boyle
did.
at the exact
Whoa,
same time
wow.
that this movie was
Whoa,
out. Yeah.
Sheraton Manic Universe.
Mm.
Where she knocks on his door and basically wants to tell him that Pedro,
This movie is
the
just
doorman.
a list of indignities.
Exactly. That Pedro the doorman is dead,
Right,
and that she's
Rip
collecting
Pedro.
many money for his funeral,
right.
and then
He
basically
got his penis cut off.
She says like, "Oh, he got his dick cut off," which obviously makes sense later on in terms of like why also that she would say that.
In retrospect, it's a big tell.
Yeah, but clearly, obviously, clearly also she's into him,
Into Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah,
Not
and
Pedro.
right? And Phillip Seymour
Definitely not Pedro.
Definitely not Pedro. And Phillip Seymour Hoffman is not really like into
No, he
her,
wants
at
to
least.
fuck Lara Flynn Boyle.
Yeah. So like, what do you like? For example, like the politics of that too, where I think his attraction to somebody who is like conventionally attractive, and the way in which and obviously yes, I get it that it's done in such a way that you're not supposed to feel sympathy for the character,
Right.
But it was really kind of so cliched, like so fucking cliched in certain respects.
Do you mean stop? You keep doing this. You keep being like, yeah, I'm talking, and then I'm gonna do this on the microphone. Keep your mouth on the mic.
So what I was trying to say is
Come out your ears. So is your point that he?
By the way, I think we've met our quota. I think you can only say 5 times at any movie podcast.
That's probably true.
And I believe we've already said it like 20 times.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault.
So
it's film's fault.
It's not your
so.
fault. It's not your
fault.
I know. So you're talking about how the fact that he's attracted to a conventionally more attractive person to him, and then there's a woman who would be considered from a traditional standard not conventionally attractive. So there's kind of like a hierarchy of hotness or something ridiculous going on where it's like, so what do I make of that in terms of how does that make me feel about him as a character?
No, I don't know.
No, I'm curious.
I'm just trying to suggest that again, it's like another things that this cliched things that this film does, and then tries to put a twist on it.
Well, for everything that this movie does to make you feel something for the characters, it takes away from them in another way. And Cameron Manheim is a really good example of this because she's a fucking murderer.
True, but she also murdered a rapist.
And she murdered. That's true. She did murder a rapist.
But
so that's a very good point. But just the extent to which we're asked to just sit and suffer.
Yeah, no, I know.
Through the so I killed him and cut up his body, and that guy's a piece of shit. Let me be clear with you. So she's sympathetic.
Yeah, no. I think she's totally sympathetic.
Right,
I feel
she's sympathetic, but there's no one in this movie who's just easy to like.
Correct. Yeah. No. And it's also because she. Well, I guess anyway. We'll get to the diner scene because she does show remorse. She's saddened by it. But that's also where I wrote in the notes.
He's a fucking rapist.
Yeah, I wrote in the notes, and by this point I already decided that I didn't like this film. But I think I wrote in these notes that I left for us to go over. It's like. The way in which this fucking film also deals with her rape is so fucking shitty.
It's disgusting.
It's so fucking, yeah, exactly. And oh, this is so fucking edgy. Fuck you.
This also movie doesn't do a great job with people that aren't white people, I would say.
Oh, that's actually, yeah.
Let's keep moving because we're...
So cut to Joy, and she's singing a song about
happiness.
It's actually a really kind of beautiful song.
I don't think we've paused to talk about the fact that if this movie, if this movie has a core, a heart at it, it's Jane Addams. She's great. She's always good.
Yeah,
in all the things, and she's really good.
She is. She's the most sympathetic character.
She's really good in some ways.
And this is where
Cameron Manheim, to your point, might be the most sympathetic.
And this is where we find out also that Jon Lovitz has committed suicide.
Oh, that's right.
And obviously, she feels extraordinarily guilty about this.
And we also were revealed that she used to work with him.
Correct, yeah.
And there's a scene in the office.
This seems actually kind of funny, I felt.
So I think that this is one of the... I tweeted about the fact... I tweeted. And I tweeted about the fact that there's some really off-note moments in this movie.
And you felt this was one of them?
Yeah, one thing that I think that Todd Solondz does really well is have a background-foreground thing that's really interesting. He'll put something going on in the foreground, and then you'll see something playing in the background that's really interesting. The problem is that, there's this, Greek chorus quality to these characters that I'm just kind of what? It just doesn't... I don't know. It doesn't play for me because it's very, what? Do you remember that guy? What about that guy? How about him?
Yeah.
And we have Jane Addams' experience foregrounded there, but it's just did he go oh, we're filming the scene tomorrow, better write it? It just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't.
The young Molly Shannon, by the way.
Yeah, young Molly Shannon's great. Molly Shannon does that thing so well.
I found this sympathetic because it kind of speaks to the depersonalized space that is the contemporary workspace.
Yes.
And how nobody makes eye contact, nobody knows one another.
Do you have an office?
I do.
Do you share it or do you have your
I
own
do,
office?
yeah. We have it's almost cubicle-esque.
Oh wow, that sucks.
It does kind of suck.
I thought academic professor types were all supposed to be in a room.
Not at CUNY. Actually, so the next scene is we cut to Helen. No, actually Helen and Helen and Trish are having lunch.
At a restaurant.
Yeah, and this is where obviously they talk. This is where Trish says oh, maybe I should try to write a novel. And Helen's you should do it. you should totally do it. But it's also
She's like,
in
I
this
don't
very
know if
kind
I
of
want that kind of success.
Yeah, but it's also
Eat
like
my face.
it's also like in this very kind of like dismissive sort of way.
Do you need to like pause or something?
No.
Oh, okay.
Where you could tell.
'Cause I noticed you're not making a lot of eye
No,
contact.
I'm looking at all these screens. I'm trying to
What is that?
I'm trying to keep everything going.
Coming to his ears.
So
It's really important to go.
My phone has ears?
Come in my.
Sure.
My phone has ears.
Sure it does. Whatever. And this is also where Helen says, like, we who have everything enjoy who has nothing. So they're like totally shitting on her sister.
Oh man, the way that this movie
and they discuss their parents' divorce.
Flips that at the end is really great.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So now we cut to people protesting.
So Joy has left her office job to be an ESL teacher, which I've done that grind. I've been on that grind in New York City. I know what it's like. It sucks. I made a film about it. You can check it out on my website. It was in like 2 festivals. But she crosses a picket line to be a teacher.
Yeah, for these refugees, right? And they're explicitly told that they're refugees.
Right. Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. They're sort of like
and people are calling her scab, obviously, because she is. And she says, I'm not a scab, I'm a strike breaker. I was like, no, that's what a scab is.
Yeah, that's actually what a scab is. Yeah. Shout out to Lyft and Uber.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not Lyft and Uber, they're drivers.
That's what.
Yeah.
No, that's what I meant.
I've been writing all these checks directly to the CEOs of Lyft and
Uber. I misunderstood what unions were.
Am I not doing this right?
Oh no. Yeah, Marvel.
And she goes into the room, the classroom. The students are like, they start chanting for Marsha.
Yeah, Marsha. Yeah.
And here's another thing also with this movie, like fuck this movie, because all of these like refugees, all these people who are not like white are so othered, right? They're just there.
Yes, that's a good point.
To be like this anonymous mob.
Well, also the union members are kind of othered.
That's actually a really good point too. Yeah, totally.
I don't know too much about Todd Solondz. I know he's a professor. He teaches at NYU.
Oh, does he?
Or he has. I don't know if he does anymore. But I think he does the graduate program. But what are your feelings on the way this film? Do we want to come back to the union thing at the end, or do you
I mean, it's just like there's no politics.
Interesting. Okay. No, you think so?
Yeah, because when she does at the very end say that like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this line of work, she's not saying she shouldn't do this line of work because she realizes like, oh yeah, being a scab is bad. She says it because obviously the relationship with the student didn't work out. So
let's talk about she relationship with the student. These students don't like her, but there is one student, Vlad, played by Jared Harris, who's probably best known for playing Lane on Mad Men.
Yeah. And he's supposed to be he's Russian.
His name is Vlad, and he sort of like tells the other students to shut the fuck up so she can teach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and she develops a relationship with them.
Right,
and obviously, of course, because you know you're watching Happiness, it's not going to turn out to be any sort of good relationship.
No one ends up happy.
And this is actually where, and so the next scene is where Dylan Baker's at the baseball game, and this is where you find out that he's kind of infatuated with one of Billy's friends, Johnny. I believe his name is.
And so he watches Johnny bat, and then we cut to a pizza parlor.
Yeah. So basically, the dad's like, "Oh, I believe my son might be gay. Should I do something?" And Dylan Baker's like, "Do something?" And it's like, "Yeah, should I get him a prostitute, a sex worker?" And he's like, no.
And this is what's really good about this performance is that I think that Bill Maplewood is a perverted man, but I think one of the things the movie does really well is it grounds you in this guy's perspective, so that at times you think he's right about some things, but oh yeah, he's a fucking pederast.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah. But like just the language around it's all just very like. Bleh.
And the next scene is basically them at home, and Johnny is sleeping over. And the kids are playing video games, and this is again when like the film gets really fucking uncomfortable.
Didn't you love that video game that was just boop boop beep 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 boop boop boop?
I did get nostalgic. It's like 98. It's definitely probably like
games are better. It's better than that.
Super Nintendo, yeah.
It would have at least been like
something.
Yeah, it was fake.
And like these bougie, like upper middle class white people would have bought something fancier.
He puts like sleeping pills in the ice cream, and everyone gets tired. Billy falls asleep. Mom takes Junior to bed, but Johnny doesn't eat any ice cream.
Right. So he has to make him like a sandwich.
Such an...
and there's this like, like tension.
Is he going to get to rape him?
I know. I was like, oh, this fucking film.
Yeah, it actually, now that I think about it, it uses suspense.
The shittiest way possible?
Yeah. Ew. Yuck.
Did you not watch the same film?
Here's your DVD back. I don't want it.
I know it. I'm the one that had to buy this on Amazon. I'm definitely on the fucking
I
list.
paid you back for it, right?
You know you did, but
Okay.
I'm on a list somewhere.
Yeah, no, I wasn't buying that thing.
So cut to the next day.
Well, it's weird because you made that best movies list immediately after watching it, and it's just Happiness.
It's like from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Best films of the last 20 years.
Happiness, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2 because Dylan Baker plays Lizard in it. Yeah.
And then like number 8 is like Multiverse Spider-Man.
Enter the Spider-Verse.
Enter the Spider-Verse. Sorry, because that film's
That
fucking
movie's
amazing.
great.
But all the other films just Happiness. And then cut the next day. Dylan Baker
And Life During Wartime, the sequel to Happiness.
Dylan Baker is in bed with
His wife, and he seems fulfilled sexually, and it's gross.
And she wakes up and she's like,
Bill,
"What
did
happened?"
we?
Yeah, and he's like, "Yeah."
And of course, when you say "did we," mean did they bone?
But of course, yeah. And this is also like where the film, I guess, like becomes really like about him,
The dad.
Yeah, because then now we have like another scene where they're at breakfast, and the kid throws up.
He throws up.
Yeah, the kid throws up, and
This is so awful.
yeah, and he drives him home.
And then they cuddle in the car.
The kid like falls asleep.
Puts his head on his shoulder, and then falls into his lap. And we're supposed to be like, yuck, yuck,
Yeah.
yuck. Like, little boy is giving guy a blowjob.
And there's another fucking scene. Oh, is that what? I mean, that's what like what's supposed to like sort of like.
No, he doesn't actually
gesture,
give him a
yeah.
blowjob, but like I think that like him like putting his
That's
head
what
in his
the-
lap.
yeah.
And you're, like I remember just being like, I rolled my eyes so hard my like neck hurts.
Yeah, I think we're gonna call the cops on us. Like, what the fuck
It's-
is like this
it's
fucking
atrocious.
film? And then we cut to later that night. Again, Bill is talking to Billy, and they're talking about like penis size, like the.
And he's like,
Billy's,
it's not the
complaining.
length that matters, it's the width,
It's the width.
girth.
Yeah, but then there's this funny thing where like I think like Billy says like, oh, like my
Ben Friedman says he's
he has like a 12-inch penis or something.
11 inches.
Yeah.
11 inches, George. Get your facts
Oh yeah,
right.
sorry.
And he's like, Ben Friedman is full of shit.
He is full
but
of
he
shit.
also is revealed in that scene that his parents are out of town
Oh yes,
on vacation, and then there's a dinner scene where they're planning to go to a PTA meeting, and the babysitter cancels,
Right. Yeah.
and the dad leaves to go
Later
to the PTA
on,
meeting so
yeah.
the mother can take care of him, and he calls and gets the kid's address
Right. Yeah.
and goes over there, and there's a shot of a street sign
That says like troll.
that says the name of the street, and as far as it goes, it's a tastefully handled rape of a child.
Yeah. Oh my god, this fucking film.
And then he comes home and he has brought home milk.
Yes, and that's later. Yeah, now that we're like going through like scene by scene, I'm like, what the fuck is even the point? Right?
Yeah.
It's like
Let's wrap it.
all these kind of like vignettes that kind of lead to like nowhere, and then
Right.
then we cut to like Mona, who's like trying to find a place to live in, and again, I think at some point something like there's discussion about like loneliness here.
Yeah. Lenny goes and has
Sex with Diane.
Has sex with Diane.
Who's a woman that's mentioned earlier too, because Mona's like, oh, you're in love with Diane or something, or
Yeah.
you're into Diane because she's a little bit younger, and he's like, I'm not into anybody.
Yeah.
I will say this though, after they have sex, that's like to me like one of the most touching scenes in the film, where like so they have sex, and like Ben Gazzara like gets off of her.
Lenny and Diane.
Yeah, Lenny gets off of Diane, and he's like looking around, and she thinks like he feels guilty, and she's like, don't feel guilty. He's like no, I don't feel anything at all.
Yeah.
And I felt like that to me was actually like a heartfelt moment in the film.
Yeah.
Where you kind of like really get to like the desperation.
I guess that
of it all.
Lenny's character is the only one who doesn't really do anything terrible in the movie to anyone. He just kind of wants out.
He just kind of wants out. Yeah. He seems exhausted.
Goes to his
and tired
doctor.
and suicidal.
So let's wrap this up. Let's get to the end very quickly so we can talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So Cameron Manheim, whose character's name is
Christina,
shows up back at Phillip Seymour Hoffman's place. They have a weird altercation.
Yeah. And this is after, by the way, where Phillip Seymour Hoffman has had like so they have that exchange, right, where Lara from Boyle actually is into him.
Yes, there's a scene where he cuts her and calls her, and he's like, "Oh fuck, you're so bad, you're so full of shit."
Yeah.
And she like is
she's into it. And this is
which is actually very funny.
It's very funny, and it happens right after you see her in her apartment, like freaking out.
Yeah.
Where she like calls herself like a phony and like talentless or something.
And then her
And that's
phone
when he
immediately
calls
rings.
her.
He basically is like, "You're a phony and you
Yeah.
suck, and no one cares about
And
you."
she's like, "Yeah, I do suck. I'm a zero." And then eventually they meet. Like he walks over, he knocks on her door. they have this
And he's
really
like,
awkward moment on the couch where he like slowly creeps his hand.
And then she
towards
says,
it.
"This isn't working."
This isn't working.
It's very funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Why doesn't Todd Solondz just embrace his like physical comedy genius and just like make good comedies? Like I think it's there.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's kind of like the cynicism. I think that's again what like really pisses me off. Like the film believes like cynicism is saying something.
Right.
When,
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just very, very quickly get to the end of the summary. Phillip Seymour Hoffman ends up going out with this Cameron Manheim woman after having like an awkward thing. They dance and they have
Which is a
dinner,
great scene, yeah.
and then it's revealed that she was raped by this guy Pedro, and she has murdered him. And is slowly throwing him away. Joy ends up going home with her student Vlad, and they have sex, but it's revealed that Vlad is married or has a girlfriend
Doesn't care about
who
her.
attacks Joy at her job. Joy goes to confront him about it, realizes that Vlad has stolen her stereo and guitar and wants $1,000 from her, and she gives it to him.
Yes.
And finally, Trish
finds out
that her husband is a pedophile because he's arrested by the police.
Yeah, I will say this: I didn't think it was going there.
The father of Johnny calls the police on him. And there's a brief scene where Johnny talks to the police and
they find out,
he's
yeah,
bleeding. Am I missing anything big? I guess the other thing is that the final moment between Phillip Seymour Hoffman and Cameron Manheim is them laying in bed together.
It's a beautiful moment.
It's a beautiful
they climb into bed and they're both like fully clothed. Well, she's wearing like her like nightgown, but they turn away from one another,
right?
Which suggests obviously not like the happiest of endings.
Right.
And also, you find out at the very, very end that she's been arrested for murder.
She gets arrested for murder.
Yeah, but you only find out because the last scene is the family,
right?
Having like brunch or something.
So really quickly before that, it's worth pausing to talk about the final scene between Bill Maplewood and Billy Maplewood, where it's very clear the whole family knows that Bill Maplewood is a rapist. Mm-hmm. So Billy comes to talk to him,
and basically, and
Billy's
and
like,
to it
"Did
all.
you rape? Did you? What did you do with these kids?"
Yeah,
and he admits to having sex with them, and then Billy asks his dad, Bill, "Would you do that stuff to?" Would you do that stuff to me? And he says, no, I would jerk off.
Yeah.
And then Billy cries. And then we see Trish, Billy, and her other son leaving.
Yeah.
And then a title card. They leave very early in the morning. And then a title card says 6 months later. And the entire family, so Billy, mom Trish, sisters Helen and Joy, and parents Lenny and Mona are together in Florida. And
the kids on the balconies watching swimming at this pool,
changing, and they're all eating a meal, and some of them are drinking, some of them are not, and sort of the alliances have shifted. So Joy and Helen are kind of together, and Trish is clearly the like pathetic one, who, married a pederast.
Yeah.
And Billy is watching a woman. Am I steamrolling?
No, sorry.
And Billy, because I want to get to this.
The
film is interesting. And Billy is
masturbating on
the balcony. And we've spent a big chunk of this movie watching this guy Alan call women and say terrible things to them on the phone. I'm not even sure if we spelled that out as clearly as we could be, but he's
he's awful.
He's awful. But Billy comes watching this woman, and you see his cum hit the wall, and then it cuts to
the railing,
a reaction shot of his face, and he looks exactly like
That's a good point.
Alan.
Yeah, and I did not pick up on that, but you're totally right. And also the dynamic too of him like looking at this woman.
He's looking at this woman, and he's been told by his father he's found out that his father is a pederast and that his father would not fuck him. And so if there's something interesting that the film does for me is that it deals with the idea of like, there are people in the world who are so fucking damaged by garbage and garbage family and all these things that these are cycles that keep repeating. The idea that, and one of the things that's interesting is that Helen says to Joy, like, oh, I have a man for you. And she's talking about Alan. It's very clear that Joy is that
Oh,
Helen
you
is going
think
to.
so?
Oh yeah, 100%. The way
I
she
didn't
talks
pick
about
up
it,
on
he's in
that.
computers. It's 100% Alan. So my
Ah.
theory is she's
That's a
maybe
good
gone
pickup.
100%, which is crazy to
So
think.
that they're still friends 6 months after the
I
fact?
think I just think my feeling 100% is she says he's in computers and it's supposed to be Alan.
Oh. And I think doesn't Trish say something like, I like computers.
Right. I like computers. Why can't
It's like,
I?
yeah,
Oh
but-
my god.
And then she's like, no, this is, and she laughs, right? Doesn't she laugh? And it's like, no, this guy isn't for you.
Yeah, this guy's in for you. But there's something about the mirroring of Phillip Seymour Hoffman's character Alan in this kid's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're
That's
right.
very
that's
interesting,
really great,
and it
yeah.
speaks maybe to your your theory about history, because it's like everyone is in pursuit of like feeling good for a second,
Yeah, no, completely.
but like at the expense of everybody else's sort of life.
Misery, yeah.
Right.
And then I think that, and again, that's where like this is obviously like the moment of happiness in the film.
Yeah. So the very last thing is the boys. Billy says, "I came,"
Yeah,
and everyone looks at him.
and that's how the film kind of ends. But again, like I think like if you're, I just didn't read it. Like I think you're supposed to take it as a sincere moment of happiness. That's supposed to be an earnest kind of. Yeah, that's what I mean.
I mean, no, I
yeah.
think you're right, but
That's what makes it look so
It's
fucking
just not that.
shitty.
It's just not all that compelling to me.
It's not. I agree. Like if that's your thesis, if that's like what it comes down to, like this is where like happiness is. It's not, let's say, like establishing like meaningful connections or bonds with, like other people,
Yeah.
or let's say, and that's what's also shitty about like.
Do you think the film is self-aware though about this, about the fact that it's saying this?
I think it thinks that it's again, like I said, I think it thinks its cynicism is saying something.
I see.
And I think that's a totally fucking cheap way.
Mm.
But that's why to me it's like it's totally of its time.
It's also a movie that seems to mistake, maybe this is exactly what you're saying, but seems to mistake nihilism for profundity.
Yeah, no, totally, exactly.
Like, wow, how deep. No, it's not.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't.
and I don't think, and I don't think a film needs to be like, look, the fucking turn horse, right? There's no hope. It ends in like death. It ends in destruction, but it's still like saying
It
something.
gestures
it's not
towards
a cynical,
hope, I think.
and it does gesture with some with the gypsies. At the,
Yeah.
It's not exactly. There is some hope to it. There's like a certain kind of sense that there's a potential for something different.
It's good that we're talking about mainstream films like The Turin Horse on our podcast.
I fucking love the turn.
Yeah,
horse.
it's
so
Bellatar's
fucking
the
good.
greatest there ever was.
It's a good thing Phillip Seymour Hoffman's in that too, so we'll be able to
The
talk
Turin
about that
horse?
later.
Yeah, he is the horse.
Plays the titular turn
It's just the
horse.
titular horse. He plays Nietzsche, actually.
And the guy goes to him, he's like, oh, poor horse, you're dying. He's like,
Oh, fucking come in your ears. I do think that if I could imply a dialectic relationship
Ooh.
between Phillip Seymour Hoffman's character and the young Billy Maplewood
Please.
is one of the most fascinating things the film does.
It is,
but
yeah.
again, it doesn't necessarily say anything that we wouldn't already maybe understand, except to like root our understanding of someone's really fucked up perversions in like a family tragedy.
Yeah, without question. And I think we didn't.
And the tragedy that is America.
Without
It's
question.
also, it is
The ongoing tragedy. That
the
is
ongoing.
America.
Welcome to the
unfolding-
ongoing tragedy that
that
is
is
America. Let's talk a little bit about Phillip Seymour. So that's
fucking
happiness.
amazing.
That's happiness. Let's talk a little bit about Phillip Seymour Hoffman.
That he's amazing.
Yeah, that he is truly an
Yeah.
incredible actor. One thing we did, in addition to watching the film, is we watched the scene from Boogie Nights, which came a couple years before this.
94, I believe.
Where where Phillip Seymour Hoffman playing Scotty J. So
Scotty. Oh yeah, Scotty.
the scene in Boogie Nights where Phillip Seymour Hoffman playing Scotty J shows Dirk his car,
His car.
and they're sort of looking at the car, and Phillip Seymour Scotty J is really enthusiastic, and he kisses Dirk Diggler, and is like, "I'm sorry I did that."
Yeah.
And there's this really weird exchange, and like he tries to be like, "Oh, I'm just so drunk," and it's like he's not drunk at all.
Is that, yeah. This scene also the registers, right? It goes from like funny to sad to pathetic.
It's
so quickly.
There's more contained in this scene than I feel like there is in happiness in some ways in terms of how I feel.
in many ways, yeah.
But and then after Dirk Diggler walks away because it's so awkward, there's the only cut in the scene cuts to him in the car, and he's like, "You idiot, you idiot, so stupid." And
That's actual
I
audio
feel
from
like
the film.
when I joke, I feel like when I joke, I combine the "oh, fuck you in your ears" and the like. And the like,
This
idiot,
guy, yeah.
because early in his career, he's playing these like really low status characters,
Yeah.
who have like that are repressed and
Yeah.
have something kind of wrong with them, if we can say that. And like, there's just such an I don't know what if you but the reason I suggest watching the scene is I feel a relationship between these two characters.
Yeah, well, again, that's why like he's such an amazing like somatic actor, like he bodily, like in the way in which like he really kind of wears like these people's personalities, right? And he's so good at kind of expressing that, and also to think about him as like as an actor who's able to pull like the patheticness of like Alan and Scotty, and also just like 4 or 5 years later, you know, turn well maybe longer than that, but to turn in like the masterful performance in like MI3, where he's this kind of like super
he uses his body in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
And we can sort of start to see it like the way, and like the Master, the same thing. You know, I always think about the pig fucker scene in the Master. I also want to
remember that.
Well,
scene,
he's just like, you pig fuck. Yeah. I'm really excited to see like how as we watch these films, how he went from playing these kind of, let's say, pathetic characters to these like really powerful, formidable figures.
Totally.
And how because you bring up a good point about his size and his sort of like the way he uses his body is really interesting. So far, we've seen him play 3 very repressed men who don't know how to navigate the world. Yeah. And that seems to be a little bit of his calling card. And I haven't seen Patch Adams, and I'm not gonna, but I think he's sort of an adversarial character in that movie too.
It'd be also interesting to think about like what he does with Capote's sexuality in that film, because I've never seen it.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well,
we did it.
This was happiness. We got through it. I do want to say that you know, there's been a little bit of a hate-a-thon on this, but it is a specific vision. It is very well made.
I'm glad I saw it, even though I will probably never see this film again.
I think it's a bit of a relic, but I also have to give credit where credit's due to the fact that this film got made, and it got made at a very specific time in American cinema, and like we're far away from that. And that's disappointing, because I'd rather support like an idiosyncratic vision like this, though maybe not from the same kind of person again. But it's a confounding little movie.
It certainly is.
Well, I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm George Fragopoulos.
And this was
Uberbusters.
It was Uberbusters. That's right.
It was Uberbusters.
We did it.
My phone has ears? Why would my phone have ears?